We're here at Midnight Madness 2008 after the premiere of Not Quite Hollywood. I'm here with director Mark Hartley and as well as Brian Trenchard-Smith, the director of Man from Hong Kong, Dead End Drive-In, and numerous other great films.
Which we should point out do feature in the documentary.
Yes, they are featured in the documentary. Now, we were just talking about the political climate in Australia around the time of the tax shelters that took on.
So, most people think that a lot of these films were made with tax shelter money, but that's not the case in Australia. The tax shelter 10BA project, which allowed 150% write-off, only happened much later, which was about 1981.
81. Turkey Shoot was initially funded that way. Turkey Shoot, otherwise known as Escape 2000 in the US and Canada. But one of the reasons half the budget didn't turn up is that the government changed the rules in the middle and cut the tax break back to 130% and then back to 100. So some of the investors said, "Oh no, we're not interested in that." So it was a short-lived tax boom for investors at that level.
That's not to say that there was still private investment early on.
Oh yes, there was private. I mean, my early films were totally funded by private investment, and the film points out accurately that the two prime ministers on opposite sides of the political fence, a socialist and a conservative, were very keen on Australia developing its own film industry. Gough Whitlam and John Gorton. And when Whitlam's socialist government was turned out by a reprise of the conservative government of Australia under Malcolm Fraser, he nonetheless continued support for the Australian film industry in terms of direct investment by the government, as provided it was matched by the private sector.
Everyone has just clicked off this interview now, Brian. They're totally bored.
Yes. What they want is shit blowing up.
Right.
That's what they really want. Yeah. But can you give us some verbal shit blowing up?
I was just going to say, it's interesting that, what's interesting about the doco is that when we talk about the Australian film industry, what probably people from America and certainly Canada wouldn't understand is Australia didn't have an industry for so long. We didn't have any Australian films or characters or even voices on screen 15, 20 years before the 70s rolled on.
Yeah.
So seeing any kind of Australian accent on screen was a massive novelty.
Yeah.
And the films that they flocked to back in those days were films that were loud and rude and proud.
Yeah. That's it, and it also synchronized nicely with the change in censorship laws, which allowed forbidden fruit to be put on the screen.
Australia, up to then, was one of the most heavily censored countries in the world. So when our R certificate, which is very different to your R certificate, our R certificate, what is it, the equivalent of an unrated rating here, or an NC-17?
Well, the equivalent really of an NC-17 in the US, and I'm sure Canada has it. Canada has an under 18s restricted classification, I think, but it has to be pretty strong to get that.
And the content that went on screen did push the envelope as far as it could be pushed.
Yeah, well, you look at the length of John Holmes' schlong.
See, most people don't equate John Holmes with Australian cinema, though, so that's kind of confusing me more.
I suppose, yes. But one of the things, though, that genre filmmakers in Australia recognised, and it's shown in Mark's documentary, is that we thought internationally about films. We, unlike others who wanted to celebrate Australia's colonial past, we wanted to sort of make films for young people all over the world who liked blowing shit up and severed heads and tits and arse.
I guess it's interesting. I assume that most people from the States and from Canada only would know about Picnic in Hanging Rock, Breaker Morant, if we're lucky, and Crocodile Dundee and Mad Max.
That really would be the sum total of people's knowledge, and after that,
and they wouldn't even know about Mad Max; they'd know about Road Warrior, the sequel.
Yes, also, and maybe BMX Bandits, which did get because it was a family-oriented film, did get a fairly wide release across the world.
But here in the doco we show that there were literally hundreds of films made that were action, horror, suspense, and and put stunts on screen that's still hard to believe.
Well, some of those stunts just simply aren't done anymore. They're done.
Well, all of those stunts aren't done anymore.
Well, I mean, they're done now with much CG, wire removal, and digital capture of people flying through the air rather than actually having people fly through the air.
They're starting the movie again by popular demand.
Well, thank you very much, guys.
My